We have to be true to our inner calling. If you feel it, you have to follow it. And then the rest unfolds from there.
Why do you have to do it?
Because everything else is false otherwise. What I liked about the I Ching, it always talked about perseverance, that nothing was ever lost if you kept going and you were virtuous and true to yourself and followed the ideas of the I Ching, you could continue. And that's what I found so powerful. And it wasn't that, oh, you have to believe in God, or you have to be rich, or you have to be smart or beautiful. You just had to be able to persevere. The other way to look at it is that this is not a pronouncement from the universe at all. This is merely a way of getting into your own psychology. It's a meditative process. It's not about just getting to the number. It's about sitting there with your inquiry. It becomes a process of thinking about your problem. It's not like you're supposed to take the reading literally, but somehow the words might trigger some understanding inside you. And then you say, oh, I know. Not that the I Ching gave you the answer. Now I know what the answer is. The most important Taoist principle that the I Ching articulates is this. When something reaches its extreme, it changes to its opposite. When the moon rises, the sun sets. When the sun sets, the moon rises. That implies cycles.
This book is a testament to perseverance.
It is. And remember, that was the one word that attracted me to the book, the idea that you should persevere, that you should not give up.
I'm here with Deng Ming-Dao. He is an author, an artist, and a teacher. And he is an inspiration to me, so I'm so glad to have him on the show. He's the writer of 14 books and has extensive training in Taoism. And he's here today to talk about the I Ching, which I'm absolutely fascinated by, as well as his book, The Living I Ching. Thank you for being here, Ming-Dao.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Tell us about a time you had an inner calling and what happened when you followed it. An inner calling is something deep inside you that is a truth, an intuition, or something that can bring you home to yourself.
Foremost inner calling is that I want to be an artist. I have no doubt when I make art that that's what I want to do, what I need to do. Everything else is secondary to that. And art is important because it's a response to the world. And I think everybody who lives in this world is in exchange with this world. So that has absolutely guided me. It's not been easy. It's no path to wealth or fame or power or influence or anything like that. But I think we have to be true to our inner calling. If you feel it, you have to follow it. And then the rest unfolds from there.
Why do you have to do it?
Because everything else is false otherwise. You're just acting. You're just doing what other people tell you to do. And the second thing you need to know about me is that I have been severely disillusioned, disappointed, and discouraged by every authority figure ever in my life. I have found nobody reliable. Ministers, teachers, certainly not politicians. So if I follow the social path, I follow a very unstable, unreliable path. And yes, you may say wanting to be an artist is quixotic, but at least it's under my control, and it's a direct relationship that I have with something inside me. So rather than follow the changeability of society and the unreliability and the utter hypocrisy of the society, I rather follow my own inner calling.
With what you said about authorities and them not being reliable, is that what got you interested in Taoism in part, as well as the I Ching?
Yes, in part, Taoism is the doctrine, if you will, for all nonconformists. Think about the three large philosophical systems in China: Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, right?
Yeah.
Confucianism is all about following the social structures, right? And Buddhism is about devotion and following this doctrine. Taoism is about doing what you feel, how you follow the spontaneous flow of life, and it has great intellectual standards, but everybody is supposed to be an individual. So you needed that because both Confucianism and Buddhism were so rigid in their structure, it offered no leeway for people. So that's why, of the three, I turned to Taoism.
Is it appropriate to mix and match the three?
Well, when people go to China or they ask the Chinese person, are you Confucian or Buddhist or so on, they're confused by the question because everybody in China mixes and matches. And if you grow up Chinese, invariably you grew up Confucian,
Yeah, it's true.
right?
Yeah.
And so you need the other two to soften Confucianism. Buddhism speaks of compassion, right? And devotion. Devotion and compassion to a higher spiritual calling, whereas Confucianism is devotion and obedience to the state and to the family. And Taoism is obedience to the Tao, which is everywhere and which is beyond doctrines. So they're not just memorizing sutras and say, oh, these rules, like I got to do this. It's all about your spontaneous engagement with the flow of life.
Is Taoism the oldest religion of those three?
Well, yeah, if you don't say that Confucianism is a religion, it's kind of partially religious and partially a system of statecraft and partially a system of social control. Well, Taoism looks at its roots all the way back to the beginning of Chinese culture, back to Neolithic times. And I think you can find roots of certain Taoist ideas back before there was Confucianism. So Confucius arose around roughly the 6th century BCE, and Lao Tzu was roughly about the same time. But Confucius had to create, quote, Confucianism in the Warring States period. And Taoism already was, I think, taking advantage of beliefs that were already in existence.
And so, for those of us who are interested in exploring the I Ching, where does it fall into place within that greater context?
Well, it's much older. You could say it goes back to at least to the beginning of dynastic China. The ideas of the I Ching come from a sage king known as Fu Xi. So he's one of the earliest emperors, right? And the I Ching arose even with the invention of writing and so on, right? So the stratas of the book come from the oldest periods of Chinese history. That's if you accept the account, right? I mean, there's no proof of this. There's no archaeological proof or anything like that, but that's the belief.
Now, how did you become interested in the I Ching?
I was a hapless person. I was a miserable teenager. And, we talked about wanting to be an artist. That's not an easy path. And there's a lot of uncertainty there, right?
Yeah.
And plus, I have problems with what else? Girls,
Oh, thank God.
right? So the I Ching became a way of sort of counseling myself and looking into the future. Now, of course, I didn't know what I was doing, and my understanding was really poor compared to the way it is now. And I made the mistake of thinking, well, it's a prediction. A prediction is not a promise, right? But what I liked about the I Ching, and this is the Richard Wilhelm version, it always talked about perseverance, that nothing was ever lost if you kept going and you were virtuous and true to yourself and followed the ideas of the I Ching, you could continue. And that's what I found so powerful. And it wasn't that, oh, you have to believe in God, or you have to be rich, or you have to be smart or beautiful. You just had to be able to persevere. And I could get behind that. And there's one line, unfortunately, it's a mistranslation, but it's such a good line that I always remember it. Even if the noble person has to stand alone, he will.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
So that's the pathetic story of why I turned to it.
But, when you use the I Ching, would you say it's divinatory?
It can be, but I don't think it's divinatory in the sense that what it says will come true.
What exactly is the I Ching? How would you explain it?
It's known as a book of divination. It's probably the oldest book in the world, but I find its value as a book of wisdom to be far more important than whether you use it to tell the future. The wisdom in there, the philosophy in there is so sophisticated, so thorough, and so profound. I think that's the true value of the book. Not that, oh, I tell my fortune. It's that wisdom there is unbeatable.
Who the heck wrote it?
Well, see, not just one person. In the Zhou dynasty, there was a king named King Wen. He was held hostage as a state hostage by the state of Shang. In those days, in order to keep a country from attacking another one, they had to give a prince or somebody high up as a hostage to the other country. And that was supposed to be a deterrence against being invaded. So this prince was sent to the state of Shang as a prisoner. And while he was in prison for 7 years, he only asked for one thing. He asked for the version of the I Ching back then. And he revised the entire book. You know that the I Ching, and we'll talk about this in greater detail, is based on 64 hexagrams. He rearranged them. Would you have the nerve to like take a holy book and like rearrange the entire thing?
No,
But
where
then
did he?
he's stuck in jail for 7 years, right? So he rearranged it all. And for the 64 hexagrams, he wrote new commentaries. And those are called the judgments. So then there's a second layer. So each line of each hexagram has a commentary. And those are supposed to be written by his brother, the Duke of Zhou, who's in himself a great culture hero. Then there's a third layer called the image, and that's supposed to have been written by Confucius. So King Wen says, you get this hexagram, here's the judgment, here's what it means. The Duke of Zhou says, you get these changing lines, here's what that line means. And then Confucius says, okay, here's the image, here's the moral quality, here's the overall idea of virtue that you should draw from this reading. Not about like, I want to do this, like I want to have a girlfriend. Mm-hmm. It's like, what moral cultivation should you have given this inquiry? And those are the three major layers of the I Ching as we know it today.
But the hexagrams exist before King Wen.
They did. Those are called the Fuxi version or the early heaven version. And what is interesting about the early version is that it's arranged in a completely consistent binary number system. So you've heard of the mathematician Leibniz. Mm-hmm. He saw the hexagrams and he intuited the binary number system, according to legend at least, or supposition. That's how he created that mathematical system. And that's just based on, here we are in the digital age, it's just based on zeros and ones, right? Mm-hmm. And so how can you get a complete cosmological, philosophical system based on zeros and ones? Well, the I Ching shows you how. And the zeros and ones are yin and yang, right? So just coming from two things, you can get the entire universe and get a precise understanding of the cosmology by looking at this system that these sages have created.
It's remarkable what they created with the hexagrams. That's what I find so fascinating about the I Ching.
Yeah, and that's why we shouldn't think that, oh, the people in the old days were dumb.
Actually, when I looked at your book and all the pictures of the hexagrams, I realized, and it was actually one of the most thorough explanations of the I Ching I've ever read, and it really broke it down for me.
Well, great.
I realized, wow, my ancestors were extremely intelligent.
Yes. You asked about Confucianism and Taoism.
Yes.
Lao Tzu and Confucius lived in a time called the Warring States period. Why was it called the Warring States? Because it was 255 years of 7 states trying to, conquer each other. 255 years of constant warfare. Millions of people were killed. At the same time, you have these philosophers asserting their philosophy. And so how desperate or how urgent were they in trying to advance their thought against this constant warfare in the background? And I think people don't ever put the two facts together, right? So while millions of people are being murdered, these philosophers are desperately trying to find a philosophy that will not only save people, but will counsel the rulers. So yes, our ancestors were great in philosophy, but there were other ancestors who were just murdering everyone left and right. So there was an urgency to all of that.
Oh, and so that's the context in which this originated.
That's right. So think about King Wen being held hostage. Everything about this philosophy is for people who are under great pressure and strain and stress. The Duke of Zhou, who I mentioned, his brother, he had to become regent because I think it was his nephew was too young. And he had to defend against a rebellion against two of his brothers who tried to take over the kingdom. So you see, these people are people of great virtue, but their virtue was severely tested in their lifetime. It wasn't a matter of just sitting in an ivory tower pontificating. There was a great pressure for them to come up with good wisdom.
Oh, and so the sages helped create the I Ching to help guide these rulers.
Yes, they certainly hope so. And you'll come across depending on the translation, it'll say the superior person, or in my translation, I call it a noble one. But really, it's a reference to a prince or a ruler or a cultivated person. How is a person of great cultivation supposed to comport himself? But that implies that they have great power and influence over people.
Now, how did the Euro sticks get involved with this system? Because the moment you talk about throwing coins or the Euro sticks, I feel like people become more skeptical of this as an actual resource.
Well, they would be more skeptical if they understood the intellectual underpinnings of that. And here's the question. How do you access the I Ching? How would you activate it? Now, if you go to a fortune teller, whether it's a Chinese one or a non-Chinese one, you say, here's my problem, right? And then they do some process and then they counsel you. Okay, so how are you going to make that a do-it-yourself process? What they came up with is a system where you could randomly access the hexagrams, okay? And so counting the yarrow stalks, because you have 50, you take one out. Look what that means already. It means the group is uneven. You'll never be able to get an even match. It's off center already. And so by dividing that in half and counting in a certain way, you derive certain numbers which determine the lines. Now, in a hexagram, you can have an unchanging line or a changing line. And the formation of that is random according to how you cast it. If you have a changing line, that means your hexagram will have a second version. So here's first version with, let's say, two changing lines. Those two lines change to their opposite. That gives you a second hexagram. So you're supposed to read the commentary of the first hexagram, read the commentaries of the two changing lines, and then you read the commentary of the second hexagram. What that means is that you have a situation. These are the factors that change it. And here's what the situation could become. All right. Sometimes you will have an unchanging hexagram. So after you cast 6 lines, you have no changing lines. That's the single pronouncement to your inquiry. That's how it works. Now, people found the yarrow stalks too inconvenient. So now it's 3 coins, right? Or now you can get randomized digital versions, right? You can have a randomizer do it.
Do you believe in the digital versions, or do you feel like as it has to be purely through the coins?
No, I think it can be anything, right? The digital thing, as long as it's truly random, it's okay. It has to be truly random.
How do you explain this system to someone who's very scientific?
Well, I think the explanation would be that there are 2 explanations, right? If everything is interconnected, everything influences everything else. Now, scientifically, if I cast the coins a certain way one day, it's very unlikely that same order will be replicated the next day, will it? So the belief is that whatever the unseen factors are that are operating that day, countless numbers of factors, will also have an influence on the way the coins fall. Okay, so that's one way to look at it, right? The other way to look at it is that this is not a pronouncement from the universe at all. This is merely a way of getting into your own psychology.
Right.
So therefore, the process, and that's where the yarrow stalk would be considered superior to the coins or a randomized computer. It's a process, a meditative process. It's not about just getting to the number. It's about sitting there with your inquiry. And remember, all the people I described to you are under enormous pressure, right? entire country hanging in the balance. So you want to stop and think about things. It
Right.
becomes a process of thinking about your problem. And then it's not like you're supposed to take the reading literally, but somehow the words might trigger some understanding inside you. And then you say, oh, I know. Not that the I Ching gave you the answer. Now I know what the answer is. Someone just says something at random to you and you go, oh, yeah. Oh, there's my answer, right? It's that
Yeah.
kind of idea.
Does the I Ching have to do with the Tao at all?
It does? Okay, but so let's look at this carefully. There are many layers to understanding Tao,
Hmm.
right? And Tao means the movement of the universe. So surely everything that's happening is part of the movement of the universe as well. So this becomes a way to reveal that to yourself. But notice that because there's so many layers, this is the Tao of people, right? Whether the kingdom rises or falls has nothing to do with, whether the sun is going to keep burning, right?
Hmm.
So in that sense, then it's rather minor version of the Tao. It's still important, yes. And it still contains all the principles that the Taoists believe in. But it's applied to a human scale. And so therefore it can't have the profundity of thinking about the entire universe, right?
Right.
So I think the most important Taoist principle that the I Ching articulates is this. When something reaches its extreme, it changes to its opposite. Understanding that takes a lifetime of contemplation,
Mm.
right? But it's always true. Look at every emperor in China who reached the greatest heights, and invariably they fell. Look at every dynasty, Tang Dynasty, for example, glory of China, but it's gone. And look at our politics today. People are pushing it to the very extreme. So it will change to its opposite.
And that wisdom's found in the I Ching.
Yes, but you know what? In typical Chinese fashion, it doesn't say that outright. The
Does it?
way it puts it is when the moon rises, the sun sets. When
Mm.
the sun sets, the moon rises. That's how
Mm.
you
That's how I say
intuit
it.
this idea. And that implies cycles. It
Mhm.
implies that life is cyclical. And that is very much part of Taoism, right? That all of life is not linear, but it's cyclical.
And they sought to capture the nature of the cycles and the change within the hexagrams themselves. Is that right?
Yes, but again, it's implied.
Mm.
It's a little frustrating, Chinese culture, because they say so many things indirectly. Whereas in the West, we go, where are the words? Where
Yeah,
does it
I
say
know.
that, right? Okay, look at a hexagram. It's a stack of 6 lines. The bottom line means early in a situation, and the last top line means late in a situation. The bottom line also means entering, and the top line means leaving. So depending where your changing line falls, it tells you where you are in that temporal situation or where you are in that spatial situation. But you have to know that. It's not going to say, by the way, let me tell you. No, you have to see it, right?
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. So, what inspired you to write The Living I Ching?
I wanted to write about change. Everyone goes, oh, everything changes. Well, what does that mean? And to understand that there is an entire philosophy of change, I think is very profound, right? Now, they changed the title to the book.
Oh, they
It
did.
was originally titled The Circles of Change.
Oh, really?
And if you look at the title page, that kind of was my graphic way of remembering that.
Oh, yeah,
So,
there's a circle there, right?
so
This,
everything
are
is
you talking
cyclical.
this one on the.
Right, right. Everything is cyclical and everything changes, right?
Mm.
Now, that's now you would think if everything is changing, well, that feels unstable. But if everything is cyclical, it means that things are going to come back around. So now all you have to do is participate in that cycle. And that's very much Taoist. Do you know where you are in the cycles and can you take advantage of that? Now, if things are rising, then you can get on board and rise with it. And when things are declining, well, if you can, you get off so you're not dragged down. Or when you see things decline, you accept that and maybe you do something about it. So, for example, I'm 72, I'm retiring. You could say my career as a graphic designer, which is what I was doing, is in decline, but I'm taking advantage of this time to write more and to paint. So then my art and my desires are in the ascendancy. Okay.
Interesting.
So I have to be able to follow those cycles in order to be stable and calm in life. That's why I wanted to title the book that way. But,
And then you got vetoed by who?
the publisher, the fun world of publishing. We need something jazzy and, seductive and get people to basically pay money for the book.
And how long did it take you to write this book?
9 years.
Tell us about that. How did it take 9 years?
Well, this was in the pre-digital age. I had to look up every word by hand. Now I can use a computer, right? And I can use an online dictionary, and it's much faster, right? But have you ever used a Chinese dictionary?
You looked up every word in the I Ching by
I
hand?
did. Yes.
To make this, and it took you 9 years. Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is a
I wish I was a better student.
Maybe that's why when I read the book, I get this very pure feeling. Very pure.
Well, thank you. I'm
Is
glad.
that because of your process and your intention?
Yeah. So I had to know what every word meant. And, different words mean different things, right? And a Chinese dictionary is not easy to use. For our listeners, you have to count the number of strokes in the word. And then after you count the number of strokes, you have to look it up in a key. And after you find the key and it says it's on page 4287, then you have to figure out what it means, right? So it's laborious.
So that's why in your books you talk about words and then how this is the meaning of the word. Because
Yeah, I think it's important. And if I may say, a lot of people just rely on translation, and the translation might be erroneous, or they might jump to certain assumptions. And over, the course of many decades, scholarship has changed. And some people assume, oh, the earliest translations may be better. But the problem is that those early translations, to me, are suspect because they were translated by people who were trying to find a Christian equivalent to the Chinese classics. So that, to me, taints it. Other people tried to translate early on the classics because they wanted to persuade the Chinese to become Christian. So they were trying to say, hey, look, you already believe in this, so why don't you join us? So that, to me, disqualifies or at least diminishes the value of those translations.
And how did you end up titling each chapter after circles?
Well, because remember, the original idea was the circles of change. So I want to show that you could understand it circle by circle from simple to complex. Remember we talked about the binary number system? Well, at the base, it's only 2 lines, broken and solid, right?
Yeah.
So everyone goes, oh, well, Chinese philosophy and the I Ching are so hard to understand. Well, you can get back to the very basics, which is just like 0 and 1, and then develop from there, right? But realizing that they're concentric, that it all fits together. It's not just a big mishmash of, fortune cookie pronouncements. It all fits into a system. So before, there was this idea of yin and yang lines. People did divination by heating up a ox bone or a tortoise shell, and they looked at the formation of cracks, and that's how they got their divination. You see there an ox bone, and you can see the cracks, and then you see all these words on it. After the bone cracked, then they inscribed the inquiry and the answer. And so that's what you see there.
Interesting.
Now, look at the formation on the right, the top. You have a solid line and you have a split line. And that's the solid line is yang and the split line is yin. Okay, start combining them. Well, if you can combine a split line and a solid line, there are only 4 possibilities. That's all. Solid, solid, solid and split, split and solid, and split. And they called that old yang, young yin, young yang, and old yin. Why young and old? Because old is going to change and young is just going to sort of stay the same or keep growing. So remember when I said opposites, anything too extreme becomes opposite? Well, what happens to an old person? And I'm an old person, die, and the young take your place. So old has to change. Okay, so the two lines at the top are called the two ideas. And then the series of four paired lines are called the four images. Okay, well, what's the next thing you're going to do? What if you took one of those solid or split lines and combined it with your four images? Well, the next possibility is you'll get a formation of 8 trigrams, or formations of 3 lines. So you see them all there, and then they gave them names. So heaven, earth, water, fire, and so on, right? That's how you got the 8 trigrams, or in Chinese, it's called the bakwa,
You're saying they combine the pair
with the
the
singles.
second row. Oh,
Right.
okay.
And that's how they got 3. Okay, so you have 8. 8 times 8 is 64. So if you combine all of those formations of trigrams, 8, you'll get 64 variants. And then you take us to the next page. Okay, on the right side, you see the 64 hexagrams, right? Now, they arrange the trigrams into a formation, an octagonal formation. That's called the bakwa. The one you see there, look at it carefully. It's arranged so that each trigram is across from its opposite. So start at the 12 o'clock level where it says heaven, and go down to the 6 o'clock level where it says earth. So heaven and earth are opposite. Or if you look at the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock level, you have water and fire. So these are arranged in their opposite formation. Okay. And this is called the early heaven, or the Fuxi version. The Fuxi was that legendary emperor. If you look for a moment at the 64 hexagrams, you see that they start not with 1, but with 0. And so that became the binary number system. Each one of those are zeros and ones, and that's it. Back to the original yin and yang, it generates the 64 hexagrams utterly consistently, utterly mathematically.
Wow.
This is the formation and the tradition that King Wen remade when he was in prison, rearranged them. They
He
looked
rearranged.
like the right side, and the 8 trigrams, the bakwa, looked like what you see there. And he changed it all. When King Wen's bakwa is rearranged so it's cyclical, so you'll not see that opposites across from each other, you'll see it goes around. He then said each trigram will have a seasonal equivalent, so you get the whole year going around, and it has a familial equivalent. So heaven is the father, earth is the mother, and then all the other 6 trigrams are given elder brother, middle brother, younger brother, elder sister, middle sister, younger sister. And here's the point. The gender, if you will, of the trigram is determined by the one line, not by the majority. So, for example, make sure I get this right. Thunder is the first sun. The bottom line is yang, and then there are 2 yin lines. So isn't that interesting? The single line determines the familial relationship. You would think, well, what about majority rules? Or no, it's about the position, because the thunder, the yang line, is the first line. In water, the yang line is the middle line, so that makes it the second sun. Mountain yang is the top line, that makes it the third sun. And then it's opposite for the sisters. He did all this, and then he created the 64 hexagrams, and you can see that they're not like the previous formation, but just look at 1 and 2 in the upper left corner. That's heaven, and what's the opposite? Earth. So the 64 hexagrams proceed in pairs of opposites. And so if he could just turn it over, he would. Or sometimes, because it would be symmetrical, he would have to reverse the lines yin for yang. And so those are the 2 ways that the hexagrams are created. And it's actually then 32 pairs of hexagrams. Look at the formation again. 1 and 2 begin with all yang lines and all yin lines. And look at the bottom right corner, 63 and 64. only there is the perfect alternation of yin and yang lines. Okay, so how did he create this order? We don't know. I tried my best to figure it out. He had to have determined the order of 32 pairs, right? I can't figure out, and I don't know anybody else who has figured out why he did that. Was it intuitive? Was it by some, mathematical system I can't figure out?
Why does it matter how he arranged the hexagrams? Why does that
Well,
matter?
think about the previous formation that was a perfect binary number system, and it's just arithmetical, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? If he is creating this sense of order, and if you go back to the original thing, the order is utterly apparent, right? So you go from yin and yang to the 4 images to the 8 trigrams. Okay, then all of a sudden, the order is not apparent. So it would be nice to figure out why he did what he did, or maybe it was just intuitive. I don't know.
Why he made order out of that.
Right. But the fact is that it's not just any old order, because clearly he started with heaven and earth, and clearly he ended with complete alternation. Those 2 anchors are enough to say it wasn't like he just got it out of a box and this at random and threw them all together. There was a thought process there.
Right.
So, how did he do that? I don't know. But that's the order that we have today, thousands of years later.
Interesting.
Over time in history, people took the trigrams and they gave all these associations with it. And that's what shows on the table. So then when you use the I Ching, you need to know these ideas in order to do this. But can I just point out some ideas that I think are important?
Mm-hmm.
So you have heaven and earth, right? Well, that makes sense, right? Notice that heaven and earth is the Chinese name for the world. And notice that the world isn't, unitary. You need 2 things, heaven and earth, in order for it to function. And you asked about the Taoist content of the I Ching. Right there, the implication is you have to cooperate and work with others. Otherwise, there's no world. So think about that, all right? Well, I think heaven and earth implies the setting to this world. Then you have 2 kinds of energy in the world. Well, you have sunlight, and you need fire, but you also need water. You have 2 kinds of fundamental directions. Fire goes up, heat rises, water sinks. So I think there's a picture here of the dynamics and the energy that are in this world. What's the rate at which things happen? It's either sudden or gradual, yes? So sudden is lightning or thunder, boom, right?
Yeah.
Wind, gentle, going through everything. So now you have the setting, heaven and earth. You have 2 kinds of energy and direction, fire and water. And you have 2 rates at which change occur, gradual and sudden. What has to happen then? Result, right? And so the last 2 are 2 kinds of consolidation. Water, lake gathers, the water gathers. Water has gone down and it pools. And the name for that trigram is actually delight or joy. Everyone is happy when everything gathers. Where do people put their settlements? By water. Where are the marketplaces for exchange? By the water. Then there's mountain. It's a different kind of consolidation. It rises up, right? The mountains get pushed up. It gets solid. It gets high. So the name for mountain here is not mountain, but it's a picture of a man turning around and being angry. So remember that lake was delight. What's the opposite? Anger and being standoffish, right? So you see, there are all these ideas that are deeply involved. And I should talk about the other names because they're not intuitive names. And you remember I told you I looked up every name in the dictionary?
Yeah.
Sometimes I get to the name and it goes, a word in the I Ching.
Oh, right.
That's like of no help
Circular.
whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The word for heaven is also the word for dry. So I have been startled by walking through the store, Chinese market, buying something. And wait, there's that word. But it says dry biscuits. It's a picture of the sun rising up over the trees and vapor, the mist being evaporated. That's important, isn't it? That shows the action of heaven. Earth is a picture of lightning striking the ground. Well, okay, but it also implies the gods or commands because it's supposed to be a picture of two hands of the gods and the lightning coming down below. So you have a sense of the sacredness, right? Water, they don't say water. There is a word for water, right? Like, can I have a glass of water? They don't say that. It's a word that means a pit. Okay, wait. You guys are talking about water, but you're going to name it after a pit? Well, because water's always in a deep, dangerous place, in a ravine. Okay? And then fire is welling up, but it's also a word for separation. Does the fire leave the wood? Is it that the fire is flickering and so on and so forth? Okay, so then we have wind, right?
Yeah.
It's a picture of four hands on a loom. So now you have this idea of the interweaving of wind. You see, they're so profound. It's not just like, oh, blowing in the air. How it interweaves, how it binds the world together. Don't we breathe? Don't we need that air movement? Thunder is it's a sound. It's onomatopoeia. It's like the sound of thunder, but it means shocking. When the thunder comes, everyone is startled and scared and shocked, gradual and sudden. So there's so much profundity in these trigrams, and that's, I think, important to bring out as well. Because if you understand this, you're going to understand a more sophisticated way of looking at the world than just like water and fire and so on. It's much deeper than that.
I did not realize that all those nuances were present.
Yeah. That's why I wrote it out, but that's why it's important to get all this.
Did they intuitively just match these
We don't
meanings
know.
with the visual of the trigram? How did they get these meanings? We don't know.
We don't know. I don't think we know who named the trigrams either. We don't know.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And then the idea is you throw the yarrow sticks or you toss the coins, and then you get certain trigrams. And then based on the meaning associated with the trigram,
So you toss the yarrow sticks or you toss the coins, and through that process, that gives you one line at a time.
One line at a time. Okay, that's right.
And so you have to do it 6 times, right? And so in the process of doing that, the reading will give you different kinds of lines. You can either have a yang line, a yin line, or a changing yang line, or a changing yin line. So those are 4 possibilities. You write them down, and then when you do it 6 times, you look at the formation, and that tells you what to look up. So remember, it gets built from the bottom up. That's important to think about as well. Remember how I said that the bottom is early? So we're starting at the beginning, and then we build up.
Okay, now tell us about this from your
that's
book.
Everything that we just talked about arranged in a circle. And you start from the inside, and it's everything we just talked about. There's a yin line and a yang line. Then there's the 4 images. Then there's the 8 trigrams. Then there's the 64 hexagrams.
Where I get lost is a circle beyond that, because now they get really big and thick at this circle.
Oh, well, that's just a graphic designer's problem, right? How do you fill in that space?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then there's this one at the very, I guess
those are the final King Wen's 64 hexagrams, right? So I imposed both Fushi's system and King Wen's system all at once. So graphically, it expresses all the different hexagrams of the I Ching.
It's very beautiful. I really like seeing it in a circle.
Well, that's why it was circles of change, but it got changed. If I could have made that the centerpiece of the book, then it might have explained much more.
So do you use the I Ching these days anymore?
I don't use it to tell the future. I use it to study the wisdom that's in there. And so let me tell you, back when I was in my 20s, I realized that I couldn't do anything unless I rushed home and did a casting.
Did you become obsessive compulsive with
Yes. And so I made myself stop. I said, okay, I'll try to absorb the wisdom so that I don't have to cast the I Ching, and then I will own my mistakes. And that's but I will tell you 2 times in, maybe my 50s that I did cast the I Ching. And I will give you both those examples as a illustration of how profound and how subtle the reading is.
Okay, yes, tell us.
So one time I was going in with some friends to buy a piece of property, but it's 3 hours outside of San Francisco. So I cast the I Ching and I got a single hexagram called the well. And I thought, well, this is great. Because I was told when we bought this property that the most important thing is that your property has to have water on it. And this property had a well that was so powerful. When they first struck it, it like shot a geyser in the air. So I thought, oh, well, that's a good sign, right? But look at the reading, the well, if the pitcher, meaning the container that draws the water, cannot reach, or if the rope breaks, then there's misfortune.
That's what the reading is for the
That
well?
was the reading, right? I mean, I'm paraphrasing. It got harder and harder to get there because it's 3 hours away. And finally, we had to sell it because it was too hard to get to. If the rope does not reach, you see, I thought it was a good thing. I thought, well, yeah, there's a well. That's great. But we couldn't reach it.
So it's like subject to interpretation.
Well, and it's subject to discovery after you think you got a great reading and maybe you weren't that right. So I'll tell you the second time.
Yeah.
My mother died and I shared a studio with her. There were 2 pieces of property, 4 businesses to unravel. I was in grief and it was taking a while for me to get going to sell the property, right? I was very reluctant to do so.
Yeah.
I got a reading release and it talks about water flooding in. So I thought, okay, it'll be all right. There'll be a release. Eventually I'll find my way, go with the flow, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
One night I finished work, I turned out the lights and I went downstairs. And when I got to the bottom floor and I stepped down, my foot went into water.
Oh, jeez.
It was raining hard. The drain in the back had clogged and the entire building was flooding with water. The whole building. It's like water from front to back. I panicked. For a moment, I thought, I should just leave, shut the door, and, But I did it, right? And I called, fortunately, my brother-in-laws came to help and so on and so forth. Well, in the process, my artwork was ruined.
Oh, no.
So I thought I got a good enough reading release, but it talked about water coming in. That's exactly what happened. And that was the impetus finally for me to move and finish all the work. But you see, the way that the omens came true was not the way I expected. So I have great respect for the I Ching. It's a very scary thing. It is right.
Oh.
But sometimes we have to go through life and make sure we understand how it's right. And sometimes its prediction takes a while to come true.
Does the I Ching does it have an interactive effect with us, which then changes how we perceive life or the world, and then change our behavior, which then self-fulfills the I Ching?
Yes, I think it does.
Oh.
That's one of the reasons why I think the title, The Living I Ching, is appropriate, because I don't think that the I Ching today is the same as the I Ching in the past. In other words, you have millions of people, I think, casting the I Ching. You have had revisions, editing, commentaries. I think all that attention and all the times that people cast the I Ching change it. And you say, well, wait, the words are the same and the book doesn't change and so on. But the consciousness around it changes. If we go back to that beginning idea that randomness is in reaction to the zeitgeist around you, and surely all these people using the I Ching change the zeitgeist around the I Ching. And that's why I think the title, The Living I Ching, is appropriate.
Interesting. Now, would you say that tarot cards function under the same principle as the I Ching?
I don't know how to do the tarot cards, but from what I see, it's, archetypal ideas. But you see, it depends very much on interpretation. I don't think there is a written book the way that the I Ching, right? You have to depend on the intuition of the person doing the tarot cards for themselves, or you have to depend on a tarot card reader.
Yes,
But
but
you
isn't
see-
that the same with the I Ching? We have to depend on our interpretation of the I Ching?
Yeah, but there's a book. You see, you have to come to terms with the words and the stories and the structure and so on. I think there's a more complexity to it and more structure to it. And therefore, even though people say it's intuitive, you can't play around very much. You're limited by the structure of the book.
Would you say the mechanism is the same in terms of, instead of the coins, they shuffle cards and then choose some cards? Like
Right.
the same
It's still random.
the principle of like change being a part of everything. I forget how eloquently you explained it.
Well,
That then informs the cards you get.
yeah, of course. If you're inquiring about change, doesn't it make sense that your process has to be about change too?
Yeah.
Right? So we do a mini ritual, perhaps, or process of change, whether it's the cards or the coins or the yarrow stalks, in order to access a greater wisdom about change.
In that moment, yeah.
In the moment, right?
Accessing wisdom in that moment that's associated with it. So it's so
And
interesting.
notice it takes a person to do it. You see, I suppose someone's going to invent this soon. It would be ridiculous to have, let's say, a subscription service in which AI gives you a reading every day because
That'd be
you're
kinda
not
cool.
doing it. Right. Because you're not doing it.
Yeah.
You have to do it. It's just like Tai Chi. You can watch a video, but you have to do it yourself if you want the effects.
Right. And so your book is meant to be used with coins or the yarrow sticks. Or I guess if there's an app, an online generator of the cards,
Yes.
and then you look it up and then look up
Right.
the word, the hexagram, and then use your book, which is the translation of the original I Ching, and then form your interpretation. Did I get that
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you include the lines from actual King Wen in each reading, is that right? Well, so there were these statements.
Okay, remember? So, okay, on the left side,
Yeah.
is a poem, and that's my poem. But at the top, it says the statement. That's King Wen's pronouncement.
That's associated with the hexagram. So when he was in prison, he rearranged everything and then he wrote a statement associated with each hexagram.
That's right. That's right. And then the lines, those wording, those words are written by the Duke of Zhou.
Oh.
And then the image, that little paragraph down in the lower corner, that comes from Confucius. It's an image like how you're supposed to imagine it, how you're supposed to, a kind of rubric that you hold in order to absorb the wisdom of that hexagram.
And then you said you do it. You throw the yarrow sticks or you toss the coins line by line to get the hexagram, but then you get two hexagrams. You can, or
right.
you can just do one.
No, you can't just, you might get.
Oh, you
one.
might, okay, back to what you were saying
Right,
before,
right.
if you got the same hexagram twice.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you get one, then you only read that one.
But the changing line between the two
is only if you have a reading where the first hexagram has changing lines. So let's say you got a hexagram where, just for simplicity's sake, the bottom line is changing and the other 5 lines stay the same. So when you get to that first hexagram, you read King Wen's statement. You read only the commentary on the first line. The other 5 are irrelevant to your inquiry. You only read the changing lines and you read the image. Then it's going to change to a second hexagram, right? So you go to that second hexagram and you only read the statement and the image. You don't read the lines of the second hexagram. The first hexagram is your situation. The lines are the specific details of how it's changing. And then the second hexagram is what the first hexagram is changing into, right?
That makes sense.
So here's my situation. Here's the situation that's going to happen. Why is it going to happen? It's because of the lines that we are reading.
Did you have any good I Ching stories from when you were a teenager using the I Ching? Did it help you get any girls?
Oh, no. Here's one that's really not a good one. There's one called copulation.
There is a hexagram
Yeah,
called
I think
copulation.
it's at 44.
What is 44?
Yeah. And then there's 32 is duration. That's a nice one, right? Do you know the I Ching has a shut up hexagram? Number 4. It's, if you get number 4, it says, I'm not going to answer anymore. So, one of the stupid things is, like, if you don't like your first reading, then you do another reading hoping to get a better one.
Interesting.
And then there's another difficult one that's 18 that's called poison. And it's a picture of 3 worms in a dish, right? Which is like, ooh, Back then, I thought, oh, that's death, right? But I've come to understand even poison as being important. Think of poison as fermentation. Well, with fermentation, you get something better, right? So that's why things aren't always at face value bad and at
Yes.
face value good.
The image for poison says, wind below the mountain, poison. The noble one stirs the people and nourishes virtue. That's not
Right.
what I would associate with a card called a hexagram called poison.
That's why you have to get to the wisdom that they have in there. It's not trivial. And that's why you have to wrestle with it. So if you were given these images like wind below the mountain, you just said, I wouldn't write a hexagram called poison. The
Yeah.
fact that it is so often so contrary to our beliefs or our assumptions, I think is an important reason to understand the wisdom there.
It actually is very wise because it's like saying, my interpretation, there's a mountain above, like a structure or societal, think something happened in society. Then there's a wind below, kind of disrupting things. And the noble
Yes.
one is like blowing that wind below the mountain to kind of stir virtue. We need some poison right now in society.
Right. So that's, you see, that's the kind of process that they want you to go through.
Huh.
But if they just gave you the answer, like, yes, you should go out to dinner, well, that would be a really ridiculous kind of manual, right?
So do you recommend coins, yarrow sticks, or digital forms of the I
Well,
Ching?
Yarrow sticks are nice, but they take a long time. And unless you're super into it and you really want to use it as a meditative function, I don't think we really have time. So I think the 3 coins are good. At least the 3 coins is faster, but it gives you something tactile to do, and you have to thoughtfully build your hexagram. I think if you just go, give me a hexagram, you could do it, but I think doing something manual would be good.
Does it matter what kind of coins you use?
Well, no, I've used 3 quarters, right? But the hip thing to do is to get 3 old Chinese coins, the kind with the square hole in the middle,
Yeah.
and use that.
And then the 3 dictate which line you get?
Right. So you think about a coin. Coin has 2 sides, right? So we're going to just use heads and tails. You can have all heads, all tails, 2 heads and a tail, or 2 tails and a head. That gives you the 4 images, right? So you'll either get a solid line, a split line, a changing solid line. That means it starts out solid in the first hexagram, split in the second, or vice versa. And so those are your 4 choices. Those are the only 4 choices possible. So for each of the 6 lines in the hexagram, there are 4 possible choices. If it's just yang or yin, it doesn't change. But if it's a changing yang or changing yin, that's how you get a changing line.
You're going to have to explain it another way because this is the part I don't get how the coins work. You have 3 coins.
You shake them and you drop them on the table. They're going to fall in one of those 4 formations, right?
Yeah.
You can't just like put them down on the table.
They're going to drop. But then that's what I don't get is like how to read the coins. So then each coin corresponds with 1 line, or the pattern of 4 corresponds with 1 line.
The 4 possible formations will dictate the nature of a single line.
Of a single line. Oh,
Right.
So then you have to
So-
do it 6 times to get
That's
each
right.
line.
So here we are, blank piece of paper. I need 1 line. So I'm going to take 3 coins. I'm going to throw them, shake them, and throw them down the table. Depending what I read, I'm going to draw a line. So let's say 3 heads is a yang line. So I throw it down. I got 3 heads. Draw a yang line. Let's say I throw it down and I get 3 tails. I'm going to draw a yin line. Okay. Now, what happens if I throw down and I get 2 heads and a tail?
Yeah, what's that?
Well, it's going to be a yang line, but it's going to change to a yin line later, and vice versa. Okay? So that's how I can either get a stable yin or yang or a changing yin or yang line. And I have to do this 6 times in order to build my hexagram.
And you just assign that if it's all heads, this will be a yang line.
Yeah, you decide in
You
advance.
decide that. Okay.
I mean, it's also written down in the book. But, but
That's the
you
part
have
that
to
confuses me.
and you can't change it, right? You can't go like tomorrow
What I
I'm going
want.
to 3 tails into yang, you should just like say what it is, right?
Yeah. But this is an amazing book because it's very pure. Like if you want to know, access the I Ching, like here it
You
is
can do it.
purely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you can do it, right?
it's beautiful. And how'd you come with the poetry in it?
I had to write it. And that's another process because this is how I met my poetry mentor. I
Oh,
met him and very quickly he gave me some books of poetry and I looked at them and I thought, wait, I know this book. And it turned out he had been an English teacher at my high school, but he left the year before I entered. But I had seen that book in the school library. So he says, well, what are you working on? I said, I think I might want to write a book about the I Ching, but I'm going to wait till I retire someday. And I thought I was being modest, right? Because I was in my 40s at the time, I think. And I said, why would I dare to write a book about the I Ching until I'm older and, smarter and blah, blah.
yeah.
He goes, no, you must write it now. As soon as you have an idea for a book, you have to write it. That is, if you're a serious writer. Damn, okay. Well, I said, well, I have this idea that I write a poem because I'm trying to get at the essence of each hexagram. And so I said, will you help me? He says, I'll read it, but not if you just want me to praise you. I said, oh, no, I'll take the criticism. Well, believe me, he was true to his word. Each poem I must have written 50 times. I would fax it
Wow.
to him and it would come back marked to hell. And, and I would try again and, come back marked up. Or the phone would ring. He goes, you have got to stop writing like this. He was tough, but, that's how I got through it.
What was his reaction once you finished the book?
Oh, he was happy with it. It's dedicated to him in the front. So, yeah.
This book is a testament to perseverance.
It is. And remember that I told you that was the one word that attracted me to the book, the idea that you should persevere, that you should not give up.
That's very beautiful. And if somebody wants to start exploring the I Ching, how would you recommend they start doing it?
You just get a book, you get 3 coins, and a piece of paper, and you try it. And the nice thing to do is to really sit there and not like, are the Giants going to win the game? But like something that is important to you. Should I move to Colorado? Should I take this job? You should not ask either or questions. Don't say, should I take the job in New York or the job in Washington?
Why is
You
that?
say, because it's not set up to give either or answers.
Uh,
You have to ask, single questions and say, should I take the job in New York? And then you would cast it again and say, should I take the job in Washington? And then you compare the two. But notice again, it's just like, and look at my own experience. It's not like, oh yeah, I'll take the job in New York, I'll be rich. It's not going to be like that, right? It might has other things there for you to think about. Maybe it will be lucrative, but it might be personally difficult. And that's why you have to read all the different commentaries and let them sit with you in order to really understand what the I Ching is telling you.
in addition to your living I Ching, are there other resources about the I Ching that you highly recommend?
I think you could look at other versions of the I Ching, if you want to compare. There's one written by a man named Alfred Huang, Huang, that I think is good. I think everyone has to read the Wilhelm version just for historical sake. But I think there are problems with it because it's a translation of a translation. It's very
Famous.
famous, but it
Yeah.
was translated from Chinese to German and then from German to English. So that's like,
Oh.
that gets to be pretty remote, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of the classical version of I Ching in English. So I think people should probably look them up. There's a commentary on the I Ching called The 10 Wings. And those are important to read because they give some of the background information. Can't think of a book that has been published just with the 10 wings, although they're in the Wilhelm version. But you can find it in an online resource called ctext.org, ctext.org, and you should read the 10 wings as well. And those will help. Then if you can get through all that, then if you read some more about the Zhou dynasty and about King Wen himself, it will help you understand the background, King Wen and the Duke of Zhou. Because, of course, we're very cynical and jaded nowadays.
Yeah.
But let's say they were as pure and heroic as they were. Okay. I think that they are good models to follow. They're models of wisdom and unselfishness. And even Confucius admired the Duke of Zhou. So now, if it's the sage of all China, his hero, well, God, there's something to this guy, right? So both men were, virtuous. Do we know historically whether they really were? If we were to go back there, would we agree? I don't know. But
Huh.
I think just to say that as models, can we be as faithful, as wise, as virtuous, as thoughtful, as selfless as they were? It's worth reading about their lives in order to understand those ideas.
Are there books you recommend in addition to the I Ching for those who are exploring Taoism? I guess your books, right? 365 Tao.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Yes.
But
365 Tao is a book of meditations, and
Mhm.
so is the Lunar Tao. And then there's a book called Scholar Warrior, which shows how to do the exercises and movements. And right now, I just delivered the manuscript. I wrote a translation and commentary on the Tao Te Ching. So that should be coming out, at the end of the
That's
year.
what you've been working on?
Yes, that was 5 years, but at
Oh,
least
that's so
then I had digital
exciting.
dictionary.
Oh, I
Yeah.
can't wait for that translation.
So I have the ambition to make it the best translation out there. And so we'll see how it does when it
Oh,
comes
I
out.
can't wait.
Yeah.
And for readers and listeners who want to support your work, how can they find you?
Well, you can go to my website. It's just dengmingdao.com, and they can find me there.
Okay. Well, thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much,
you.
Ming
It's good
Dao.
to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
very
That was
welcome.
really fascinating. I appreciate your time. If you'd like to support the show, the most helpful way would be to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or YouTube or Spotify. It would just be awesome if you could also share an episode that you found helpful with a friend. That would help spread the word about Inner Calling and helps us make the show better for you each time. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a beautiful day.